Well, it's a great pleasure to be here today. I spent much of my childhood in the suburbs of Chicago, so it's fun to be here today and tell you guys what's going on at Woods Hole, and in particular what this cartoon depicts, which is a lot of what happens in my own laboratory, which is looking for life in some pretty strange places, and in the examples I'm going to give you today in the deep ocean. So the MBL is dedicated to scientific discovery and improving the human condition through research and education in biology, biomedicine, environmental science. Myself and many others are interested in some of the really big questions that cross many biological disciplines. So how does life spread across our planet? How does life diversify? How do life and its co-environment evolve? And what does the future of life look like? These are really, really big questions. But in fact, I'm going to be talking today about the tiniest life forms on our planet. And even though this is a beautiful blue planet, we call it Earth, I want to convince you in the next 9 minutes that it's planet Microbe. So what do I mean by that? So in sheer numbers alone, there's just a ton of microbial biomass on our planet. There's about 100 million microbes in a single gram of soil. There's more biomass or more carbon contained in microbes than animals and plants combined. In and on you, there's about 10 times more microbial cells than human cells, and there's more microbial cells on Earth than stars in the universe. These microbes come in a huge diversity of form and shapes and sizes, most of which are invisible to the naked eye. But they serve a myriad of important functions on our planet, from mediating critical biogeochemical cycles like carbon, nitrogen, oxygen. They provide us with delicious food, important drugs. They inhabit almost all animal species, invertebrates and vertebrates. And of course, sometimes we mess things up and they help us clean that up. So this remarkable amount of diversity in form and function, it's probably not surprising to know that microbes themselves, in fact, are just very diverse. So this is the universal tree of life, showing the 3 domains of life, the archaea, the bacteria, and the eukaryotes. These 2 domains are completely microbial, and much of this eukaryotic tree is in fact microbial. And this stunning diversification is due to the fact that microbes have been around for a very long time. Life originated on our planet about 3.8 billion years ago. So this huge span of diversity has to do with the fact that they've had a lot of time to evolve. And this is in contrast to humans, which sit over here in the animal node. Modern humans have been around for a few 100,000 years, first appearing about 5 or 10 million years ago. So microbes have had a huge amount of time to evolve, and they occupy almost every habitat and niche on our planet. And even though I'm talking about microbes in the deep ocean today, it's important to know that recently the MBL, University of Chicago, and Argonne National Lab have joined together to form an interdisciplinary initiative that's really focused on understanding the microbiome. And the idea is to bring together these diverse groups of scientists studying everything from life at the bottom of the ocean to the human microbiome. We're asking pretty similar fundamental questions and to advance the science forward. But what we do very well in Woods Hole is we study the oceans. You all know that the oceans cover 70% of our planet's surface, and actually beneath the surface, there's some pretty remarkable things going on, which is what I want to talk about today. And a lot of this has to do with how our planet has formed and the process of plate tectonics. And it creates a number of remarkable features on the seafloor, and you can see them in this map. This, for example, is the world's longest mountain range, the Mid-Ocean Ridge. It's about 55,000 kilometers long. It's all underwater, and it's formed when 2 oceanic plates are moving apart and new crust is forming. What happens is then volcanism is created. In fact, most of the volcanism on our planet, about 80%, occurs beneath the water, which is why most people don't think about it. But this is a fundamental process that's critical to how our Earth has formed, the gases in our atmosphere, and the habitability of our planet. But to really appreciate how amazing what's happening in the deep ocean is, you have to understand what's happening in the surface ocean. And this is a diagram of the marine food web, which actually is what's happening in all surface aquatic systems, including right here in Lake Michigan. So what happens through the process of photosynthesis that I'm assuming most of you are familiar with, single-cell bacteria or phytoplankton are harvesting energy from the sun and fixing carbon dioxide to produce carbon. That carbon then moves into this food chain and all the way up into grazers and the classic food chain that we're all part of. We're secondary consumers within this food web. This is how it works in the surface world. But how does it work in the deep ocean where you don't have sunlight and you have very little organic carbon? In these volcanic systems, we have to flip this food web over, and instead, the base of our food chain are these single-celled microbes, these bacteria and archaea. Instead of harvesting energy from the sun, they're harvesting chemical energy from these basic water-rock reactions that then feed into a very similar type of microbial food web and up into a food chain. We think we have a lot of the same players as we do in the surface world, but most of them are very poorly described or unknown. What we do know is that this ecosystem looks very different from the surface world. So this is perhaps the most well-known example. This is video footage from the Galapagos spreading ridge, which is where hydrothermal vents were first discovered in 1977. These giant tube worms, which can grow up to meters long, can survive in this dark, hot, harsh environment because they're stuffed full of microbes. Inside their gut are single-cell bacteria that are harvesting the chemical energy from these volcanic fluids, fixing carbon, and creating organic matter that then supports the rest of this food chain. I like to remind my students that chemosynthetic life was not hypothesized. Nobody predicted it must exist on our planet. This was a completely accidental discovery by a bunch of geophysicists, in fact, and it completely turned biology on its end. And it's hard not to look at these types of videos and not think about what life might have looked like very early on in our planet's history. So some of the microbes that we study in my lab live completely disconnected from the surface world. And the discovery of organisms like these and other extreme habitats have led many scientists to talk about maybe life originated in these types of environments. So I have two examples up here. The first are the Methanogens. These organisms are using volatile gases from these underwater volcanoes to create methane. In fact, Methanogens have diversified an extreme amount. They're in your gut. They're in a lot of soils and other ecosystems, but in those cases, they're getting their hydrogen from fermenters, other organisms consuming carbon. In these volcanic systems, they're getting it from the water-rock reactions. Similarly, we have groups of these sulfur-reducing bacteria and archaea, again, harnessing the power of hydrogen and combining that with sulfur in this case, which is also very rich in volcanic systems, to create energy. So these organisms live completely disconnected from the sunlit, organic carbon-rich, oxygenic world that we're really familiar with. The discovery of organisms like this on Earth and in other extreme environments on our planet has really opened up the search for life beyond Earth. These are three examples. These are high targets on NASA's list for searching for life outside our solar system, either past life or existing life. I think we're all pretty familiar with Mars, where recently there was an announcement that there's still surface water flowing on the surface seasonally. These are two moons. This is Jupiter's moon Europa and Saturn's moon Enceladus. They're both ice-covered bodies, but it's believed they have oceans beneath that icy shell. Whether or not we'll ever get to them and be able to figure out if there's life remains to be known, but by studying extreme life here on Earth can really inform our decisions not only of what that life might look like, but also how we should look for it. So sometimes I feel like studying life in the deep ocean is a little bit like what I imagine going into space is like. So this is me in the submarine Alvin diving about 7,000 feet beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean to collect samples for these deep ocean studies. We, just like NASA, have a mothership, and then we launch various tools depending on the question. For those of you who have seen the new Martian movie, Matt Damon taught us that maybe sometimes it's not a great idea to have a human presence. And in that case, we use advanced robotic tools where we're safely up on the mothership and we let the robots be put in danger. Once we have our samples back in the lab, we use all the powers of biological tools, earth sciences tools, physical and chemical sciences to really try to understand how these ecosystems work. So in my own laboratory, that includes using advanced DNA sequencing technology, stable isotope geochemistry, and the grand challenge of trying to bring these organisms back to life in our laboratories. So this might seem like really strange science, but in fact, the implications and applications are very wide-ranging, and that's what I want to close with today. So the discovery of these organisms with such novel metabolisms and different branches on the tree of life has really attracted a diverse array of scientists to the field. And here are a few examples of what some of those scientists are interested in. The first is genetically engineering their metabolism to make something else. And in this example, scientists have engineered some of these extremophiles to make either biofuels or industrial chemicals. The large diversity of organisms that we're discovering in the deep sea are a new target for natural product discovery, traditionally mostly done in soils or in coral reefs, for example, now looking for anti-cancer products, for example. And just last year, there was a new antibacterial gene, so a gene that's capable of killing bacteria, that was found residing in one of these extreme archaea isolated from a high-temperature black smoker chimney. And they're trying to patent it, and it's opening up new directions for how do we treat some of these superbugs that are such a problem. Now, some are taking life from the oceans. Others are interested in just taking stuff, material from the bottom of the ocean. This is from an article early last year. The first formal agreement has been struck between a deep-sea mining company and a country, in this example, Papua New Guinea. So these hydrothermal deposits are really rich in things like copper and gold. And this is due to begin in the next few years, and the environmental impacts are almost virtually unknown. So as we begin to take away from the sea, I just wanted to close by reminding you that we have a lot left to learn. So this is video footage that was taken from an underwater volcano in 2009 near the island of Samoa. I was part of this expedition, and until our team found, filmed, and witnessed this eruption, no one had actually seen an underwater volcano erupt, which is pretty remarkable. This has been happening on our planet for 4 billion years. This is how oceanic crust is formed. This is how all of the gases in our atmosphere get recycled, right? Impacts our planet habitability. And what was truly remarkable, so you're seeing these exploding lava bombs in excess of 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The plume above this volcano is full of sulfuric acid. The pH is around 1. But I can collect that sample, I can see microbes, I can detect their activity, I can sequence their genes. So life finds a way, even in these amazing habitats. So I would argue we have a lot more left of our planet microbe to explore. So thanks, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Julie. Thanks a lot. Questions for Julie?
Yep.
Oh, Melody, and then there's a question there, too. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Well, the life, as we know here on Earth, is based on the carbon cycle. But with NASA seeking life in space, there are some talks about life based on maybe some other elements.
Sure. So
silicon, for example.
looking for weird life, yeah. Right? Non-carbon-based life, silica, yeah.
So what's your opinion on that?
What's my opinion? Well, it's really hard to look for something that you've never seen before. But we've learned through the powers of different techniques how to detect life, even though we don't really know what it is. I don't know if I have a stated formal opinion. I know that the scientific method usually can prove whether or not something is true. So there was a lot of controversy a couple years ago that someone had discovered arsenic life, that instead of having phosphate in the DNA backbone, it was arsenic. It was a very high-profile paper that has since been through multiple experiments. It's not true. So my hope is that as we continue to develop these sensitive tools to detect different types of life, that we'll be able to A, find it, and B, prove it really is life.
You mentioned the reemergence of, you brought up the reemergence of deep sea mining, and I believe you mentioned gold and silver. But back in the day, it was a whole different scene. It was like manganese nodules or something. I forget, what's changed in that area?
No, manganese nodules are still a pretty big deal. The problem with manganese nodules is they're found in the middle of the ocean away from the continents. So just in terms of infrastructure, they're much harder to get to, and sort of the cost-benefit analysis doesn't make as much sense for these companies. The advantage of Papua New Guinea is those hydrothermal deposits, you can still see land while you're at them. And so in terms of all the infrastructure you have to maintain, all the people you have to shuttle back and forth, they've decided it's worth the cost.
What's the basic physical difference in these organisms that enables them to live under these circumstances? I know one thing, I have very limited knowledge of this, is that many of them have bilayer membranes that actually are unilamellar, two-headed things, so that their bilayers can't come apart.
Yeah, so whether it's pressure or temperature or salt or pH, organisms have different way of coping. So temperature is one of the big ones in these systems. Basically, the cells have figured out ways to keep their DNA more tightly coiled so that it doesn't unravel under heat. They have more heat shock proteins, things that just kind of keep their cells more together. The amino acids they choose to put in their proteins are slightly different based on thermal stability. Similarly with pressure, the membranes, how fluid they are, so they don't just, and same with cold temperature, so they don't just crack under all that pressure and temperature.
Time for one more if there is one. Otherwise, thank you, Julie.
Okay.